Hello everyone, Joekool here, and I am here to talk about making a needle wheel for your skimmer, a needle wheel impeller for a DC pump. And I am here to remind you that you too can do it yourself. So let's get to it. I have a DCT 12,000. This is the end result. And if you've been following along on the series, we've been talking about and testing different types of venturis and different ways to make air and build yourself a DIY skimmer. So as I've come along this journey, I'm testing and trying out multiple different things. For this part, I wanted to do something that pretty much anybody can do, and most likely have the stuff in your house or at the local home store without having to order anything special, and is really cost effective. So when deciding how to make this impeller, the needle wheel impeller, I thought about a few things. How can I do it the least expensive way, and how can I do it with stuff at the home store? And what I came up with was a acrylic sheet, about 1/8 inch, and this is $5 at the home store. And also a string trimmer line. This is something a lot of you might have if you have lawn equipment at your house. It is a 0.095 inches, or gauge, I should say, not inches. And this one is a triangular shape. This is an aggressive line. I found that even when I was at the home store, that out of all the different shapes, the round ones bended a lot and the triangle ones were most rigid. So that's what I went with. I already had a spool of it at the house, so I didn't have to buy any. But all in, I believe this is $5 for the acrylic sheet, and string trimmer line, I believe this is around $6 or $7 for a whole spool of it. So if you got a string trimmer, you're going to use it anyways, and if not, you'll have it. So what I did to start this out was I took the impeller out of the pump. I looked at the sizing of it inside the volute to see how much room I had. I ended up making my circle just a tad bigger. The DCT 12,000 is smaller than the ID of a 2-inch PVC pipe. So what I did was I realized that I had some extra space from the flat surface on the inside of the volute, so I ended up making it maybe a 1/4 inch bigger. And the ID of a 2-inch pipe was perfect. So I stuck a piece of 2-inch pipe on the acrylic, permanent markered it out, and then I started the process. I marked out the hole and the knot for the shaft. Then I didn't mark out any holes. I just drilled. So I took a 7/64 drill bit and drilled into the acrylic. Now, you don't want to drill super fast or put a lot of pressure, but it will go pretty quickly while you're drilling through this, so it doesn't crack. I didn't have any cracks, so like I said, a good sharp 7/64 drill bit is fine. The piece of string trimmer line will press into there tightly. If you do it on top of another piece of acrylic, just press on it until it reaches the bottom. Now, if you're finding that it's a little too tight, sometimes these edges of the triangle will catch on the outside of the hole. So I just took a piece of sandpaper and just lightly took a tiny bit of the corner off. Then after that, after I drilled all my holes in a circle, which I'll show you here, I'm not going to take it off the shaft here, but as you can see here, and I'll provide some pictures. Here's all the pieces glued in. Then I took my cyano acrylate and bonded the back side of it. So once I got all the pieces in, I took my super glue and put a smooth surface all the way across the back, making sure there was no holes and that it got into each hole, so it would go down and fill in around the little pockets around where the triangular shape is in the hole. Now you can use an activator or you can just wait for it to cure. So if you let it cure, then you'll be good to go. You won't have any issues, the water won't affect it at all, and you'll be good to go. So what I did do, you'll see in the photos, is I left 6 holes just past the perimeter of the first set of needles to allow water to get through the wheel, and that lines up perfectly with the slots where the water goes in across the magnet so it can cool the shaft off on the pump. So that's something you want to do too. Reference the pictures. So now that we got this all together, I'm not going to go through and show you every little step. I can, but I think you guys get the idea, and you'll get it based on the photos. So once I got the needle wheel pump, some debris from my testing tank in there. Once I got it pressed down, now let me go back a little bit. You have to make sure that you have a gap behind here for water to get through to cool the shaft inside and get inside the motor. So when you're looking at this old impeller, you'll see that it's stepped and there's a spacer on the back side of it. So what I did was I accounted for that, and I made my needles come to the same spot as it would if it was on the that actual impeller was in place. So there's a nice gap back there, and the needles come to the same height as where the old impeller went to. Now you can play around with this. I probably could have made this another 1/4 or 3/8 wider. There's some more space inside the housing, but I wanted to keep it as close to original size as possible and the same height to make sure that I didn't have any issues with clearance, because the shaft will move in and out a little bit, so you want to make sure that you're spaced for that. Now when I first started assembling it, I realized I had made these too long, so then I had to go and recut all these. But what I did do is I did shorten this first set just a tiny bit, and they are a tad bit shorter, but you can do yours all at the same length. I don't see any issues with it. Okay, so once you get it on the shaft, you'll want to take a couple, one of these pieces and split it down the middle. Now be very careful. Do not get your fingers in the way of the razor knife. Set this on a piece of lumber, pine or something, a 2x4, and let the razor knife do the work for you. Don't get your finger in the way. Don't try and hold it. I don't want anybody cutting themselves. Then I slid it up from the bottom on both sides, a wedge of it, into the notch that I had made. Refer to the photos to make sure it was nice and tight on the shaft, because you don't want this to come loose or wobble or anything. You want to wedge it on there tight, and it will never go anywhere. So I did that. We're good to go. Now we're going to put this pump back together. Oop. Darn, O-ring likes to pop off. Alright. Good. Now let's talk about the loop. Now, if you're using a J-bow pump, a DC pump like this, they have these screw-on fittings with the hose barbs, and some of them come with a slip connect fitting that fits on. But if you don't have those, they're not a standard American PVC scheduled 40 male fitting. What they are is a straight threaded fitting, and they are not pitched at all. So you can't put a standard scheduled 40 fitting on it because it's not beveled, as in it'll get too tight before it gets all the way up on it. What you can do is you go to the electrical aisle and you get the conduit fittings. They are perfectly straight and they tighten down good. Then if you're not going to run this in a sump and you're going to run it externally, I recommend you use some thread sealant, but they seem to tighten up good enough that I didn't need to use any while putting it in the water testing. If I decide to use this externally, then I'm going to want to use some to make sure it doesn't leak. But the good thing about running this pump in the water is that it'll help cool down the pump, and especially since you're using a needle wheel, it's not getting as much flow probably along the shaft as it would running a normal impeller, possibly. So you want to make sure it stays cool, but I think it would be perfectly fine running externally. So back to these fittings, the conduit connectors fit perfectly. They are pretty close to a scheduled 80 rating. The pipe they sell in the conduit, that's great, is scheduled 80, but the fittings aren't exactly scheduled 80, but they are very similar, and they are stronger than scheduled 40. But the inside stop where the pipe hits is exactly the same diameter as the output and input of this volute here. So once you figure out what position, what way out you want to have your pump run, you just put this on, slide your base on, boom, needle wheel pump. All right. Now, that is a little time consuming, drilling the holes, but you know, you don't have to spend a lot of money on it, and if you have a little time, why not go ahead and play with it and get it done. So, like I said, that cost me about $10 to make that with tax. And then I have a couple fittings here. Now, this is the final product. I tried attaching inlets to it before, different tees, tried using the Venturis that I made with the hose, with the injector style, with the tubes, jet style, sucking air. I tried multiple different sizes. I got to the 1.5 inch, which fits into the pump, and I tried different insert bushings, and I used my router of a flush cut bit and took the stop out of the bushing so the pipe would slide through it, and I had to sand down it because it's got a little bevel on it. I had to sand it down so the pipe would slide in and out of it, and so I can get the PVC pipe down inside the T fitting. So I tried 1.5 to 1 inch. I tried 1.5. I couldn't get any suction on an inch or the 1.5 because it was the same size as the T. Maybe had I slide it down there, but it would have blocked a lot of the water intake because you still want the water to move to pull the air through. So tried the 1 inch pipe with the bushing. I ended up going to the 3/4 inch bushing. Did the same thing with the router on this one and sanded it down. This was the tip I had cut. I even tried one at a much more severe angle. The end results, from what I figured out from trying just a T down deep inside here, was that you want the water to pool across the whole inlet for the air. So what I ended up doing, and this gave me the best results, is I slipped the piece of 3/4 through. I put a 90 inside this pipe. Then I added another piece of 3/4 and I centered it So it'd be this pipe would be in the very center of the opening of the T and flush with, or almost flush with, my insert pipe for the connector. And what this does is it allows it to suck enough water into the pump to get the water moving, and then while it's doing that, it creates a vacuum all the way around this fitting. So it'll pull the air right out. And this is how I got the most amount of air to be sucked through. Now, when there's no fittings on, and you just got a 1/2 inch piece of pipe, even like this, man, did it suck some air. It sucked it really well. And essentially, I'm trying to do the same thing. I even tried the flat end. I stuck it in there. You could use a T and slide with a probably 1.5 to 1/2 inch, and you can slide the tube down in there and then bend it and push it, back this way through here and get it to do pretty much the same thing. But I thought PVC was the most rigid outcome and turned out the best. This end result created the most amount of bubbles of any setup, and it is very simple, and nothing's going to happen to it, and I still get a decent amount of water coming through it. So in a second we're going to go and I'm going to do some video of this pump running just as you see it here. Okay, so we are here in the test tank. We have the DCT 12,000 with the custom made air intake and volute system and DIY needle wheel. Now, if you're not familiar with these DC pumps or Joekoolreefvid, they are a really reasonably priced DC pump. We have all been using them for years. Yes, they're less expensive than some of the higher end name brand ones, but I tell you, they have a large line of series and they do pretty well. These pumps are primarily 24 volt DC. It's got a 100-watt controller. They have a slow startup and then they ramp up to whatever your setting is. These pumps have a feed mode. Of course, you won't be using it in the setup. It comes with the controller, which hooks directly to the pump with a large, pretty good sized length line, and then a pretty good sized length line to the 24 volt power supply, 24 and 5 amps output. It's good size. See, that's my hand, but I have pretty good sized hands, so there you go. Alright, so let's get this motor running. Spool it up. Let's do a top view. Still spooling up. It'll be a little loud, so bear with it. We can make silencers for that. Okay, I think we're up to speed. Once again, this is fresh water. Once we get it into salt water, a lot of the bubbles will be smaller. Let's get you a side view. Not too bad for a little piece of acrylic sheet and some string trimmer line, would you say? Alright, so next step would be to Put it in salt water and see what happens. And now I have done a water change in just a couple hours. I've done made 25 gallons of water and did a water change. And now I have the salt water in this tank from the water change. So we can see how it reacts in salt water. Let's plug it in. Alright, now let's try going down in speed. Let's go all the way down to 1. We'll go up step by step. 1, or that's number 2 coming on. Number 3. 4. 5. 6. 7, 8, 9, 10. Now back to 10. Basically, almost covering the whole surface with foam now. The water is almost so cloudy you can't even see the pump in there hardly.